Thanks, everybody. So we're going to talk today about customer data platforms and kind of the rise of the customer data platform. I know I'm also keeping people from lunch, so that is not lost on me. So we will make sure that we're on time here as we talk about this today. Want to just give you a couple of stats before I really get into this presentation. If I came to you 6 years ago and I told you that there was this technology, this platform that was growing by more than 50% year over year, that the estimated volume in terms of spend would be over $1 billion in the given year, and that it was having these huge returns for marketers who were investing in it, you would probably be very excited about that, and you would probably say that it was Facebook at the time. That is what is happening right now with customer data platforms in that space. As of last year, there were 64 customer data platforms or platforms that identified themselves as customer data platforms. That's 29 more than the year before. This year, it's estimated that $1.2 billion will be spent investing in customer data platforms, up from about $700 million last year. So there's a lot going on in this space, and I want to talk to you a little bit about it today. Some of you are going to say, I know what a customer data platform is. Others are going to say, I don't really know what this is. That's why I'm here. So we're going to go through a little bit of this kind of across the board. So the first stat I want to throw at you, besides kind of those revenue and volume stats, there's some Forbes Insights that came out in 2018 that said only 13% of companies feel like they're maximizing the value of their customer data or the volume of customer data. It's not a large number, and I think if many of you in the room probably would fit into this bucket as well, where you don't know that you're maximizing the data you have on your customers. We just heard some great ways that Rite Aid is doing that. But there's these steps that you have to take to get there. So know that if you're in this bucket where you're not necessarily maximizing what's available to you, you're not alone, right? You're actually in very good company. I want to step back a little bit and just talk about this is not a new problem, right? Having customer data and what do I do with it and how do I leverage it for my brand is something that companies have spent decades trying to understand, right? From back in the John Wanamaker days of I've got half of my budget going out for marketing, I just don't know which half is working for me, to how we would do things from a direct mail perspective and send mailers directly, which is still in play today. Similar problem, what do I know about my customer? What should I be sending them? Moving in then to more data-driven, right? As email became a thing, and how can we target people with email, which we're still doing today, obviously. We can resolve identities down into individual households or even individual people. There's better analytics and modeling that sits on top of this customer data. And now moving into this kind of omni-channel world, right? Where cross-channel, cross-device identities can be resolved. We can figure out more about our customers. And there's kind of this always-on expectation by our customers that we know who they are to a degree, sometimes good, sometimes bad, and that we are able to layer in some kind of machine learning and AI on top of this. So this has been around forever, customer data. What do I do with it? I've got some of it. I don't know what I should be doing with this portion versus that portion. This is an age-old problem. But as data has grown, as there's been this proliferation within the market, the challenges from the variety of data that's available, the challenges that exist from the volume of data that you're collecting, right? We're talking terabytes and petabytes of data for some brands. How we need to have that data available quickly to make decisions. We can't, very rarely can we wait any longer for that study to finish 6 months and now understand what happened 6 months ago. We're not in that world anymore. How we have to govern that data, because we have mobile apps and we've got our website and we've got our email and we've got in-store. There's so many different ways that we now have to govern the data that's coming into our systems. The data privacy, the breaches that we've seen, there's so many extra complexities here and challenges that continue to evolve from the John Wanamaker days into where we are today. And I bring all of this up because it can be very difficult. It can be very confusing to understand, what do I do with my customer data? How can I activate on this? And what can I do in the best interest of my customers as opposed to what's in the best interest of me as a brand? So when we talk to marketers about customer data, they're like, I just don't get it, right? There's so much complexity. I talked about there's 64 CDPs now, right? There's 29 more than a year ago. How is this happening? Why are there so many? Are these companies just coming up out of the blue? I see, a company that used to be called a DMP, now they're a CDP. There's a whole slew of different things that are happening. So I want to clarify some of the things for you today. There's a lot of vendors that used to compete in other categories, right? I mentioned DMPs. There might have been a tag management solution that now are marketing themselves as a CDP. There's others that say, hey, ours is the definition of a CDP. This other thing over here, not really a customer data platform. Don't let them tell you that it is. So that adds some confusion to the market. We have some that used to compete in these areas of like analytics tools. They were marketing orchestration engines that now are saying, I'm a CDP, because when the RFP goes out, they want to make sure that they're included in that. And then I also have additional ancillary categories that are marketing cloud platforms, right? That say, we're a CDP, when they're not really, but again, they want to make sure that they're saying we offer the same functionality. So there's so much going on within the market that's very difficult to understand that we want to help you try and figure some of that out, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What all of this results in for a lot of the marketers that I talk to is shiny object syndrome. Whoever has the best pitch that shows me the best way to leverage this, whether or not I know if it's actually correct for my business, oftentimes is winning that RFP. And we find that customers come to us, our clients, and say, we invested over here in this technology, it's actually not working the way that we thought that it would. That's the worst feeling you know as marketers, where you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into a technology that's actually not doing for your business what you need it to do, but it looked really great when we vetted it. But there's so much complexity here, and I want to simplify some of that for you. So what does this mean? This is a Gartner definition of a customer data platform. I'm going to give you a second to read this. And this was one that came out a couple of years ago, and they still talk about it in this way, but I think that the way that we think about it at Tinuiti is very different now than what Gartner laid out not too long ago. And I want to boil it down for you a little bit more. We think that a customer data platform should do 4 fundamental things. 1, you have to be able to ingest and integrate customer data, and it has to be from multiple data sources. It can't be just the data that's in my marketing cloud. It can't be just the data that's coming in if it's on my tag management side. It needs to be able to ingest data from multiple data sources, very simply. It has to offer customer profile management. I need to be able to go in and understand the different touch points that an individual customer, anonymized to me or not, has been able to do with our brand. From impression to on-site, to form fills, to purchases, it needs to be able to offer some version of customer profile management within the platform itself. There needs to be the ability for quote-unquote real-time customer segmentation. I'm going to let you determine what real-time is to you. I'm going to give you an example of some real-time that we could use as an example here in just a little bit. Because again, in this always-on world that our customers expect, and what Brigitte talked about this morning, which I thought was a great point around the issues that she had with one of her retailers, and then being reserved ads for the thing that actually got fraudulently purchased. We need some customer segmentation to say, I shouldn't serve her those ads anymore. And then how do you make that data accessible to other systems? 4 simple things here that we think make up a CDP. And if you have a CDP that you're vetting, I highly encourage you to ask these questions and figure out if actually they can do these things. So I kind of get that, right? I understand the simplified definition, but I also have a DMP. How does that play in here? Because we know that DMPs have been around for a long time. How do they differ from a CDP? We get that question a lot when we're talking to the brands that we work with, because they've used a DMP and they're enjoying the results that they get out. They say sometimes it's a little slow. It takes us a little while to get this data. I've got to go through IT. There's all of these other kind of hoops and hurdles. But just very basically, think of a DMP versus a CDP in this way. Data warehouse is what a DMP is. It's usually managed by IT. A CDP is something that is the single view of the customer, and it's marketer managed, right? Those 2 individual differences can be game changers for you, depending on what type of organization you're in and what types of silos you have, and how you need to break down those silos and use them. So one of the questions we also get then is, all right, do I need a DMP and a CDP? And we think of DMP and CDP in a somewhat traditional funnel that we know really doesn't exist anymore, looking something like this. DMPs are great from the awareness and consideration prospecting side of the world, right? We have some data that we know, we have some data that we don't know. We're able to do different things with those DMPs and create segments and audiences that now we can go after if we're trying to fill the top of our funnel. Awesome. CDPs are not that, right? I cannot tell you for an unknown customer that I have not resolved their identity how I can go prospect that customer, because that's not the core purpose of a CDP when you think of the single view of a customer. Eventually I can resolve that identity if they purchase something. But thinking about it this way, so we have a lot of clients who are trying to stand up a CDP that also have a DMP, and this is great. But then we have some clients who are like, well, I really want a CDP, but I still need to activate upstream. How do I do that? We work with a lot of partners that can help with that. One of them is LiveRamp that can help from a data onboarding and identity resolution perspective. You want to go out and prospect. You want to be able to understand more from an awareness and consideration and track them down the funnel. We can, that's one of the partners that we work with that allows us to help out with that if you don't have a DMP in place to do that. So CDPs sound pretty great. Real-time customer personalization. I've got the ability to, for the majority of my marketing funnel, interact and understand. I've got that single view of the customer. So how the heck would I actually use this? Because there's so many different use cases. There's so many different ways that CDPs position themselves as being able to be used. And I want to give you some practical examples to do that. Go back to this example of what we think a CDP is first, just so you can keep this in mind as we think about this next example. Based off of something like customer demographics, behavior, etc., I can build a segment and now target this segment of my customers very differently. So in this case, I say I want to target males who have an interest in sports. That is a very specific group that I want to make sure I message in a very specific way. This is not a rocket science example, but it's if you have this data on your customers, because of our definition of a CDP earlier, I can now use this to push out to other marketing platforms and message my males who are interested in sports with that messaging that hopefully resonates with them and hits them in the feels, as Craig talked about earlier, where it's appropriate to do so. Another example, we have a lot of waste we know in ad spending, and we want to improve efficiency. Those are two edicts that we often work with our brands on to make sure happens at Tinuiti. So this segment I want to build out, and if you have data and you can easily build this out today, good on you, but I would say the majority of you probably don't. I want to find somebody who has recent browsing activity on my website in only the last 7 days, who are only interested or have been browsing in shoes, but they have not made a purchase of shoes in the last 7 days, right? Very specific audience. So with a CDP, you have the ability, because again, quote unquote real time, to be able to understand who has purchased in the last 7 days, who has not, who has been in the shoe area in the last 7 days, who has not, and what do I do with that? Maybe I send out a different marketing automation campaign. Maybe I'm gonna do something on social. Maybe I'm now gonna change the way that I bid when they search for something on Google or Bing, because I know that this is, for whatever reason, a high value customer to me, and I'm looking at this data in this way. Another one, we work a lot with brands who are doing shopping cart abandonment. Not uncommon, very a real world example that gets used a lot. But what about how often ago did they abandon that shopping cart? Sometimes working with partners, they just have a shopping cart abandonment that's always running, right? But if I go back and purchase, oftentimes I still get the shopping cart abandonment emails because I've not actually tied it into a single view of the customer. So I get this difference of understanding how long ago did they actually abandon their cart. And now I can measure this differently. So those that I'm doing something that abandoned 7 days ago versus 1 day ago, I may want to talk to them differently. I may need to set a different cadence of emails. And maybe I'm saying 19 and 24 days ago, I'm not going to send them a cart abandonment because what's the point, right? But I wasn't to there if I'm just doing kind of generic cart abandonment and I'm not leveraging a data that comes out of something like a CDP to do so. So when I talk about real-time customer interactions, you guys can read this here, but it's basically enabling personalization, improving engagement through these other systems, right? So I'm not going to read this to you. You can read this as well. But when you think about a CDP, these are questions that you should be asking of those partners that you're vetting, or of your current CDP if you've stood one up, on how they can work with you from a real-time customer interaction standpoint. So I'm going to give you a very real-life example here again. Imagine that I have a 14-year-old daughter. We're looking for shoes. She's grown like a weed. I want to go get some new shoes for her. Let's say I go to Adidas, right? She loves Adidas. She's got her, she's going to kill me for not remembering the style of it right now. I won't worry about that. But I go to the Adidas website, and I'm browsing through the women's shoes. My daughter's tall at 14. I'm a tall guy. So I'm looking at the women's shoes, not the kids' shoes. And I decide, you know what, I'm going to sign up for the newsletter, actually, because maybe there was something that prompted me to do so. They're going to give me a coupon, or I'm interested. And so I do, and this is the email that I get, right? Sport meets style. That's fine. Except, number one, it's got nothing but men in it, and it has nothing to do with the content that I just consumed. I was looking at female shoes. I was not looking at anything that was sport style. I was looking at athletic shoes. And yet this is the message that comes back to me from the brand in a real-time email, 10 minutes or so after I've signed up. But what if for me, I received this email instead that ties more directly into the messaging and the content that I just consumed 10 minutes ago for my daughter as I'm trying to buy this pair of shoes for her? Because this now is something that can hit me in the feels a little more, right? Man, this could be my daughter. Like this feels more real than what I was just looking at previously, and all is engaged and driven by the CDP. And what if now, because you know that I've engaged with this type of content on your site, when I go elsewhere now, I'm seeing similar messages. So I'm not getting served the sports style, all men messaging, even though, yes, I am a man, but I'm doing this as I'm shopping for my daughter. And now I can see empowering messaging. I can see things that are relevant. I can understand more about the Adidas brand as a result of that, because I've leveraged some of that real-time customer interactivity that the data comes out of the CDP for. So again, not rocket science, but I would bet to say that a lot of the data that you guys are using today, you couldn't do it at this level, this quickly, and have it change. So if the next time I go to the site, I'm looking at nothing but men's shoes, how quickly can you change the content coming back to serve me what I want that's not just generic retargeting? So I'm going to recap this, and then we're going to have some time for any questions that you have, because again, CDPs can be very complex. You're not alone on this. This is not an easy thing to figure out. There's a lot of fragmentation within the market. We hope that you guys don't fall victim to kind of the shiny object syndrome that we talked about earlier. We really want you to make sure to expect more from your CDP. If you're vetting them or if you're using them today, push them, right? Ask smart questions. Know that DMPs and CDPs can coexist and coexist very well. And make sure that you use this data to connect with your customers, right? That's the ultimate goal of what we're looking for. We want to make sure that it's what's best for the customer, not just what's best for us, but connect with them in a way using this data. So if you have questions, let me know. There's some contact info, but I'm happy to answer any questions here in the room as well. Yes?
How do CDPs tie all of that information together, and do you see that changing and increasingly?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you CDPs tie that information together, and do you see that changing, kind of like from a privacy perspective? I think that it will change. There's a multitude of different ways that they can do it. Some are deterministic, some are probabilistic. So if I go onto a website and they now have an ID on me that they don't know who I am, as soon as I become known, now they can track back to all of those actions that I took prior and now track them back to me. So if I'm on the Adidas website, they know nothing about me except my browsing behavior. They'll have my, maybe they served me some impressions at some point and I made my way to the website. Once I actually sign up for the newsletter, now they're resolving that identity for all the touch points that happened after and now bringing me back to everything that happens going forward as well. I think that with what's happening around CCPA, those restrictions, I think, will just become more visible. So if you don't want to be tracked within the CDP, then you have the ability to turn that off to a certain degree. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. I think that when I've had conversations with the CDPs, that they are obviously very much in tune with that, and they are preparing for when that happens in various places. So yeah, I think it will change, but that's how they do the identity resolution as well. There was another question, I think, over here. Yep. Yeah, great. So the question was around when you're trying to create that kind of single view of the customer, the integration of all of the different data partners. Is that basically where you're going? The technology partners, right. Yeah, so one of the core components, I think, that of CDPs that are not kind of listed in the 4 we talk about is you have to have the ability to do that. So there's some partners that we've talked with that, if you connect, let's say, via Twitter, right? You've authenticated maybe. They're actually looking at location data from where you tweet to understand geolocation, even if they're not getting location data directly from you in various capacities. So you absolutely have to have the technology integration. I would say that the majority of CDPs that we talk to, that's natively built in, right? So they're connecting to the ad platforms, they're connecting to the ESPs, they're connecting to different authentication windows and methods in order to help resolve some of those identities through the entire platform. So absolutely it needs to happen, and they're baking most of that in. Yeah. Yeah, so is it being managed outside of marketing? What kind of support? I would say that it really depends on the scale and size of your organization. So if you're kind of a bootstrap startup and less than 50 people, marketing can manage this and no one else really touches it. But if you're somebody like a Rite Aid, then absolutely they're going to have to loop in some of what's going on with their IT team. It also depends on what you want to do, right? So the use case for a CDP from my perspective is not just for marketing. We should be using the data that comes out of this across the entire organization, and that obviously is going to rely on the ability to break down some of the silos and bring IT into the picture where it's appropriate to integrate a lot of those different pieces together. Good question. Time for maybe one more if you've got it. If not, that's fine too. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.